Welcome to this week's episode of Faster Masters Rowing Radio. Grab a seat at the table as Masters rowing coaches Marlene Royal and Rebecca Caro share their biggest secrets on how to unleash your hidden potential and plot a new course for real results on the water and off. Now, on to the show.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to another edition of Faster Masters Rowing Radio. I'm Rebecca Caro, and today we're going to be talking about the reverse pick drill. We're starting a new series. The mini series is called Drills and Skills, and it's going to be the theme of each of our podcast episodes throughout December 2023. I had to think about that for a minute. So let's take a look at drills and skills overall. Why do we do them? Generally, there are reasons which are to do with getting your crew aligned, learning the correct blade handling technique, maybe isolating a part of the stroke so that it is easier to practice on its own before you build it back into your main stroke cycle, or exaggerating part of the rowing stroke to kind of amplify its effect. Now, a lot of people listening today, I know, will be really familiar with the pick drill. It's what North Americans call warming up from backstops, where you work through the different parts of the stroke, starting with sitting in your finished position and rowing just with your arms, then going to arms and body, then working your way up the slide, quarter slide, half slide, three-quarter slide, full slide. It's often part of the warm-up, and people do it with half the crew rowing and half the crew sitting still. Some people do it square blades, other people do it feathered, some people do it light pressure, some do it firm pressure. So there are lots and lots of different ways of doing it. That part of a drill is designed to warm up the crew. The reverse pick drill is what we want to talk about today. Reverse pick drill starts at the other end of the stroke. So what is it? You start at the catch, sitting at full compression, and you put your blade into the water, and then you drive off your foot stretcher and take a very short stroke. So the drill may start with you just rowing maybe 2 inches of the slide. Now, some people like to start the drill even before that with the athlete sitting at the catch and just raising and lowering their handle to place the blade in the water. We'll talk about what each part of the drill teaches in a minute, but let's just start with rehearsing exactly what the drill comprises. So if you start with just tapping a placement into the water, you then move on to a very, very short stroke, just initiating the drive. Typically, I've said 2 inches, that's, 5 centimeters, thereabouts. So really super short. The next progression is to go from the catch, full slide, to three-quarter slide. So you're moving 1/4 of the slide's distance. Remember, when you're measuring the slide distance from the catch, the positions are reversed. You don't get to quarter slide first, you get to three-quarter slide first. Then as you continue your leg drive, you get to half slide, and continue, you get to 1/4 slide, and then to your legs just being completely straight. So each of these, you have to explain that those positions are reversed, because we tend to measure the slide quarters from the finish moving back up to the catch. After you've got to three-quarter slide, then you go to half slide, then you go to three-quarter slide, then you go to legs only rowing. Now, this is a position which is a little different from how you would classically row, because as we know, your legs tend to blend into the backswing. But for the purposes of this drill, it's legs only rowing. Then you go to legs and body rowing. So you're rowing with your arms straight. And then lastly, you move into a full normal rowing stroke, adding in the arms. So what's the reverse pick drill designed to do? I think it's got 2 really useful components. The first is to place the blade in the water before you drive. So slowing down the movement so that you get the hang of lifting the handle before the leg drives. One of the problems with teaching beginners is the assumption that the leg drive and lifting the handles to place the blade are simultaneous. They're not, they're sequential. So on the recovery, your hands need to move upwards so that the blade is moving down towards the water while you're still rolling forwards. And disassociating those two things in the mind of an athlete is actually really difficult to do. But that's one of the things that I think the reverse pick drill is quite useful for. The second thing is to get the correct sequencing off the catch, making sure that the legs initiate the drive phase and the back and arms follow. So those are, I think, the two principal things that the drill is useful for in the basic technique. But I want to add in here how to use the drill when you are in a crew or you're coaching a crew, and what the outcome of the drill is. So yes, obviously we're hoping that you will learn the correct sequence. Obviously we're hoping that you're going to learn to place before you drive. But the effect of this is to make a slightly longer stroke. If you can reduce the amount of time it takes for the athlete to place the blade in the water, if you can then get that blade placement closer to full compression at the catch so that there's less missed water, those are two really good benefits. But the third benefit, which is really important to me for crew boats, is that it helps to align the leg drive of the crew. Now, when you're coaching, if you can sit yourself either in your coach boat so that you're looking at the crew from a 45-degree angle from the stern. So instead of being 90 degrees square off and watching your crew, move your coach boat so that if the crew is here, you're looking at the crew from an angle. What that means is you should be able to see every athlete, and you should be able to let your eye be drawn to their knees and watch their knees rising and falling through the stroke cycle. Take a little bit of video before you do this drill, and then take a bit of video after you've done the drill of the crew, just doing normal full slide rowing. And you should see that their knees press down through the power phase much more in time with each other if the athletes are correctly learning to use what you've taught in the drill. So that's one of the key things about coaching, is to see the effect of what you're teaching on how the whole crew is moving. And if you're interested in this, we did an earlier podcast episode in November about whether and when to coach an individual versus coaching a whole crew. You might want to review that. How to teach it. This is not easy. So one of the things about teaching this particular drill is that you need to slow it right down. And if you can teach it in a stable environment with half of the crew sitting the boat level while the other half do the drill, that is best, because it is best done square blades. The reason being that if people are inclined to square their blade late, they'll probably be missing the catch anyway. And of course, part of the benefit of the drill is learning to place before you push. When teaching it, I like to start by getting the crew rehearsing each of the static positions really slowly, particularly if it's the first time that you're teaching it to them, or that they're not very skilled, they're beginner or intermediate athletes. Because it's important that they all know the body positions, the static positions first. And so classically, I will start at the catch, full slide, blade squared and buried under the water. I will then invite them to move to a 2 inches off the catch. And if they're not right, tell them, no, move back towards the catch, that you're only moving a tiny little bit. And then get them to rehearse that a few times, back to the catch, 2 inches, back to the catch, 2 inches. Then go to 1/4 slide, half slide, 3/4 slide, and legs only. So your legs are fully straight, but the body is still rocked forward. Generally speaking, at this point, you will see some people will have started to swing their back, and that's where you explain that for the purposes of the drill, we are not swinging our backs when you're rowing legs only. Then, of course, you do legs and body, so they then swing their backs, and then you draw the arms, and you get to a stationary, finished position with the blades still buried under the water. So that's important to begin with. After that, I start with them sitting at the catch and raising and lowering the handle, placing the blade in the water. They need to do it in time. And this is where you're watching for people shrugging their shoulders or using a backswing to place the blade in the water, rather than the movement just being from your shoulder to your wrist. So it's literally your arms are moving on their own. You may want to rehearse that without the athlete holding the oar. So just lift your arms, just lift your arms. Okay. Then when you move on to the 2 inches on the slide, show people how they push on the foot stretcher. I sometimes ask them to feel the texture of their socks and then push against that, so that the first thing that happens is your hips are driving backwards, and obviously the body angle doesn't change. And that lesson continues through to the legs only piece. It's really difficult for many people to separate driving their legs from swinging their backs. And one thing you might find is people lift their chin up, particularly if they're prone to swinging their backs or taking the catch with their back. You find that they've lifted their chin as they go. So if you get them to get their eyes lined up with a point on the back of the person in front of them, or if you're the stroke, a point on the horizon or the stern of the boat, maybe they can look at the rudder post, and get them to keep their eyes focused on that point. It becomes then harder for them to lift their chin without losing that eye placement. So teaching each position first, then moving through each of the positions, probably best not to do more than 10 strokes at each position. The reason being that when you're loading up an athlete at the full slide compressed position, it's quite a lot of load on the body. Remember, they're also carrying the weight of the boat and half of the crew who are sitting idle at this point. So it's quite heavy. Heavy is good because it helps them to feel when the oars are in the water, when they've actually got the correct placement timing. But it also means that you're loading them up, and you don't want people to get back strain. Some people also, if they're inflexible in their hip and pelvic area, will find it really difficult to get into these positions. So you might want to go back and review the setup in the boat. Again, that is a separate article. I'll put the link in the show notes that explain easy ways of adjusting the setup so that people are comfortable in the boat. So no more than 10 strokes at each position for that reason, because you really don't want people getting injured. Run through the whole drill with half the crew, obviously then repeat with the other half. And then what I like to do is to join the rest of the crew in progressively. So if you're in a sculling boat and you've had, stern pair doing the drill and you're ready to join the other half of the crew in, do it one person at a time, so that the people who have been doing the drill and obviously are very focused on placing before they drive, getting a leg drive, a very a leg initiated first half of the power phase, keeping it leg driven, the boat starts to move faster. And at that stage, as the boat starts to move faster, because another person has joined in, say you've now got 3 people in a quad rowing, they will find it more challenging to get the same feeling of placement and grip on the water before they move, because the water's moving faster past the hull. So that, if you explain to them that that is what is going to happen, then they can anticipate that and adjust the speed of the lift of the handle to place their blades as accurately as when there were 2 of them rowing as when there were 3 people rowing. And then, of course, you join in the 4th person. Similarly, in a sweep crew, you can't join in. If you're a 4, you can't join in just one person. But if you're an 8, you can join in another pair and then another pair. Then stop, have a little chat, get some feedback from the crew, and then do it again. And as with many of the drills that I like to teach, I always try and do it 3 times during an outing. Now, this means that if you're trying to do a 60-minute steady state outing and do these pieces, you're not going to get 60 minutes of continuous rowing in. When you're teaching it for the very first time, it can be really helpful to teach it on the land first using an erg, because then you're capable of getting up close to the athletes and positioning their body. I often find that, particularly with the shoulder lifting issue that I mentioned earlier, that one way to overcome that is to take the flat of your hand and put it on their lower spine below the waistband when they're at the catch, and say, I'm going to press my hand into your back and I want you to push my hand away, so that they get the feeling of driving with the hips by pushing your hand away rather than lifting with the shoulders in order to change direction at the catch. One of the things that we then need to move on to are, what are the errors that are likely to be happening in your crew when they're trying to do this drill? So the first one I've already mentioned, using the shoulder lift to place the blade in the water rather than the placement being just a lift of the arms. The second error to watch out for is when you've got onto a little bit of the slide, maybe you're at 1/4 or half slide, is you see that the athlete's back moves, as in, if you imagine at the catch, your back and your thighs are really close together, and you see their back move, and the gap between the back and their thighs opens up. It's called opening up the angle. There are 2 angles. That's one of them. They open up that angle, but the slide hasn't really moved, and that's because they're not driving with their legs. So if the slide doesn't seem to be moving back, the slide needs to move the same distance from the catch as the handle does. So if your handle has moved 10 centimeters from the point of placement when you're at full compression until by the time you get to half slide, the slide also needs to have moved the same distance. If those distances are not the same, then the chances are they're not pushing with their legs. So that's a second thing to look out for, that the back moves but not the legs. The third thing is that they drive before they've placed. So you want, of course, them to place the blade in the water before they drive, so that you're not pushing air, you're actually pushing water. And the last thing that people sometimes do is they wait at the catch. So they get to full compression, wait, and then place the blade in. And this is overcome by helping them to understand that the slide needs to be a near continuous movement, particularly at the front end. So as soon as the wheels stop moving, you need to press away to keep the wheels moving again. And when there are only 4 people rowing, you can usually hear the wheels. So get the athletes to listen to the wheels. So listen to your wheels, hear them stop, and then hear the sound again as you change direction. So that's a bit of a large mouthful of reverse pick drill learning. It is the sort of drill that benefits frequent practice. So you might want to make your warm-up the reverse pick drill rather than the regular pick drill, if this is something that you think would be useful for your crew as part of your training, part of what the skills that you're trying to improve. And please get in touch and let us know if it works for you. I'm particularly interested to get feedback from people about whether it successfully aligns your leg drive. So until next week, when we're going to have a different drill for you, this has been Faster Masters Rowing Radio. See you then.
You're part of the Rowing Chat Podcast Network. Please tell your rowing friends about the show. And if you've learned just one helpful thing from today's episode, please consider supporting the show for as little as $1 per month by visiting fastermastersrowing.com/podcast.